Meduris is a game by HABA, which, similar to a game by them that I played a couple of weeks ago, Adventureland, is exploring a new area, goes in a new path for HABA. HABA specialized in games for children, not truly family games. Yes, the adults could play them with the children, but in a certain sense they would graciously play with the children because they were games mainly geared towards very young players. Adventureland and Meduris are actual true family games in the sense that an adult player playing with kids would still enjoy the game. There is enough meat in the game for an adult to also be entertained, and also this definitely could be a game that you could play with your adult friends as a light Euro game. I would say it's at the entryway, gateway level, sort of like Settlers of Catan. Maybe a little more complex, a little less complex, I'm not 100% sure, but somewhere in that in that area there. Probably a little more complex than Ticket to Ride, but again, it's somewhere around Settlers. There are also some elements of the design that reminds me of Settlers, nothing else. The fact that you are building settlements, also the fact that there will be random resources that are distributed to the players every turn. But as you will see from my main segment, the Meduris is done in a more even, random but more even way than in Settlers, which is something that I like. So actually, before I anticipate my conclusions, let's take a closer look at the design. Here's a general view of the board. There is a main circuit around here, around which the players will build their huts and their temples. Each player has a set of huts and 2 temples. Really nice looking game pieces, by the way, and you'll build them around the circuit here. Also, that guy there, the Druid, will move around the circuit and ask for offerings, and if the players pay their dues, then they'll get victory points, otherwise they'll lose victory points. To me, that's pretty much like the druidic version of Mafia, really. Nice baby you have there. Be a pity if a changeling took him away, or if he grew a second head or something. So you're gonna give money or resources to the druid, so bad stuff does not happen to you. Now, how does the game work? Well, as we saw already, players have materials that they will use to build stuff. But then also there are, in the middle of the board, resources that will be used to do precisely so, to build things. There are 4 types of resources: gold, stone, wood, and cotton, wool, unclear. And each player also has several workers, or I should say acrobats. This is an acrobat placement game, the only one of this type that I know. What do I mean? Why acrobat placement and non-worker placement? You'll see in a minute. Now, it is your turn. You start by rolling the special die, which will modify the number of resources that the players have. If this symbol is rolled, everybody gets a resource of their choice, so they get one of these 4 resources here. If this other result is rolled, then everybody loses a resource of their choice. These other sides here, gold, gray, green, and white, will give everybody a resource of that type. So this is rolled, then they get that. Everybody gets that resource, and this one everybody gets a stone. Unfortunately, only marked by color, not by the symbols. So this die is not very colorblind friendly. But what I like is a different from, say, Settlers of Catan, where I roll dice and somebody gets resources out of turn and somebody gets nothing. Usually I'm the one that never gets anything, which is why I don't like Settlers all that much. It's a stupid game because I lose it. Now, back to being a 40-year-old instead of a 6-year-old. What I like about this design is that everybody gets or loses the same amount of resources, but you still have choices to make outside of your turn, deciding which resources you're going to take or make. I really like that. After you rolled your dice and everybody got or lost resources, then the active player can take one action, 1 or 3 main actions. One is to grab extra resources. Maybe the ones that you got during your turn and outside your turn not enough. So what do you do to do so? You take one of your workers / acrobats and you move it around. If you move it to a location, as you can see, the acrobats can be in the locations corresponding to resources. If you move it to a location where it are other people. Ta-da! They do this pretty cute thing here. When you move one of your workers slash acrobats to a new location, all the workers in that location activate and produce resources of the type that is present in that location. And a location can have up to 3 workers. How many resources they produce? The one at the bottom, 1, 2, and 3. So if this is the situation during my turn, I decide to move one of my guys there, and I'm the red player. Now I'm getting 5 gold, 5 resources, 3 and 2, and the green player still gets 1. So even in this phase, you can still get stuff out of turn, which is pretty sweet. So that's one thing that you do. You're gonna collect resources, but of course you're doing so because you're hoping at some point to build stuff with those resources. And you will want to build your huts as soon as possible around this circuit here, on this track here. To build a hut, as you can see, these spaces have resources associated with them, 2 per. This one is cotton or wool and gold, wood and gold, etc, etc, etc. So you simply have to pay the corresponding resources, ta-da, and you place one of your huts there. Now, as you can see, there are symbols there that are different in different areas of the board. When you place a hut in a region, you take the corresponding rune. As you can see, there is a pool of tokens representing the various runes, and when you build a hut, you take the corresponding rune. If nobody took it before, you take it from the initial pool. If somebody had it, oh well, too bad for them, you steal it from them. So there definitely is a strategy based on this, because of course, as you can imagine, those runes will give you points later in the game. Some other things. So when you build a hut, the druid goes moving, but we'll talk about that later. Another important thing about building huts actually is the first one. If you're building one that is not adjacent to anybody, well then that's just a hut. If you're building adjacent to another huts or multiple huts, no matter who controls them, you're building a settlement. Now, if I add that hut there, I'm building a settlement of 2, which means I still have to pay these resources, but I have to pay twice as many. So now to build there, because it's adjacent to another hut, I have to pay 2 gold and 2 stones. Later, the player decides to add a hut there, and now the player needs to pay 3 wood and 3 gold. So the price gets higher and higher as things go. And well, it may be worth it to collect resources and to add to settlements. You can also, the third action that you can do, or the third options that you have, you can only take 1 main action per turn after you roll your die. The other action that you can do is to build a temple. When you build a temple, you pay the cost there. You do not have modifications based on the settlement, and the temple really doesn't count as a settlement per se. As a hut or part of the settlement. It is used later in the game for scoring. When you build a temple, also, again, the druid gets moving. So when you build a hut or a temple, the druid advances 1 space. At the beginning of the game, he's simply advancing on that little track of his. Once he starts here, every time he moves, he goes around until he finds a settlement. And then when he finds a settlement, he'll start knocking on every door, asking the owner of the corresponding hut to give an offering. Now, you can do, if you have the resources and you decide to spend them, you can give him 1 of the 2 resources associated with your hut, and in which case you score a victory point. Or you can give him both, and in which case you score a victory point, brace yourself, for each hut in the settlement. So now I'll be scoring 3 victory points there. Then the druid comes here, and suppose I also have wool or cotton and gold, then I score the 3 victory points. So that's 6 victory points. So that's pretty sweet. And he continues like this until there are no huts left. Oh, you see some tokens here. These are simply represent advantages. If you build where there's one of these tokens, you get the token and you get the corresponding advantage. They give you different things. This one, for example, gives you 2 victory points. Those different type of things. But really, this is what's important. The darn Druid gives you the opportunity of scoring a lot of points when he visits your hut in a big settlement, if you still have the stuff, because of course you may have spent a lot of stuff to get the hut, and then the guy immediately gets there, darn, you didn't have time to replenish your coffins, and now you're in trouble. Because if you do not have the resources, or decide not to spend them, in any case, if you don't pay at least one resource when he stops at your hut, and see, he passes out, he was so shocked he wouldn't have the resources, then you lose a victory point. So that's, well, that's the rub. He goes around. When he goes through that river, the magic river of runes, what? Well, that's what it does. Then players score a victory point for each room that they have. And this is how the game works. You continue like this, turn after turn, rolling the dice, so everybody gets or loses resources. And players then get more resources by moving their acrobats around, or they build temples, or they build settlements. The game continues until a player has built all of their huts and all of their temples. At that point, the Druid senses that the end of the game is near, so he runs around, does a last round where everybody gets a chance of scoring points or losing points. So just he goes around, again, asking for offerings in every hut. After that occurs, the game is over and players do the final scoring. The final scoring is when the players will get to score the runes once more. They may have scored them earlier, probably have scored them earlier thanks to the magic river of doom and runes, but then at the end of the game you also get to score the runes again, and they are more profitable then, because the first rune that you have gives you a victory point. The second one gives you 2, the third one 3. I think you see the pattern there. The fifth one, guess how many? I'm not gonna tell you. Mystery. You have to figure it out. Temples, those are really good too, because they give you a victory point for each hut that is adjacent to it in an uninterrupted line. Each hut adjacent to it, and then each hut adjacent to that one. In word game lingo, we would call them lines of communication, I guess. Or in any case, the settlements. If the temple is adjacent to a settlement, it gives you a victory point for each settlement, for each hut in the settlement. And if it's adjacent to multiple settlements, same thing. So basically, this temple here scores me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 victory points, which is quite sweet. You total all of the victory points from all possible sources, and at the end, the player with the highest total is the winner of the game. So I'm really pleasantly impressed by this game. Like Adventureland, first I'm happy that there's a new publisher of Euro games for families. It's not a new publisher, but finally they have decided to expand in that direction, which simply means there are more games that I'm going to be interested in. Also, I'm particularly excited because my daughter Amelia, who is 6, is pretty much making the transition from the old HABA games for young children to games for family proper. So it's great. It's like HABA is following her development, and maybe in 6 years from now they will have very heavy thematic games as they keep up with this. Maybe it's like with Harry Potter, the books are written to follow the development of the reader. So, in any case, it's a Euro game that can be played by family, adults with children, or just by adults. It's a very pleasant game. I'm really happy that the game is out. Components-wise, it's a beauty, and we have come to expect very good quality of components from HABA. This game is no exception. The wooden pieces are very pleasant to manipulate. Even the tokens that represent resources, they're cardboard token, but the colors look nice. They're sturdy, thick, and nice to handle. So definitely very good components. The rulebook is a little strange looking because it has sort of like a flow chart, so you open it up, sort of pin-up type of stuff, which makes it a little complicated looking, and it almost makes the game look more complicated than it is, because right away before telling you a turn structure, they tell you, but if you do this, go in that other section. If this happens, go in that other section. I think that a single flow text would have been easier. would have made it easier for players to learn the game, but the game is not that complex to start with, so that is not a problem. When it comes to gameplay, which of course is the most important thing in the design for me, gameplay is good. Gameplay is pleasant, is satisfying. The game remains very simple, but it has a couple of wrinkles, it has a couple of decisions that you have to make, which actually are pretty interesting. About gameplay, I like the fact that you get resources every turn, like it should be in Settlers, but it isn't always the case, and everybody gets the same number of resources or loses the same number of resources, but still you're making decisions as to which resources you want to get or lose in many cases, which is to me superior to Settlers, where you don't know whether you're gonna get something or not, and what you get is what you get and you don't get upset. So I like the fact that even there, when there's this random distribution of resources, there's still decisions that you can make. And then the decisions that you're making throughout the turn are simple, but they are interesting, if nothing else, because there's really one big thing that you can do each turn, and you have to time it well based on what you see that the other players are doing on the board. Yes, sure, collecting extra resources is awesome, but if I am collecting resources, spending too much time doing so, and meanwhile the opponents build temples, build settlements in certain areas that I was planning to build next turn, now maybe I lost the perfect space where I wanted to, or if it's still a situation where I can add to the settlement, it's going to be much more expensive next turn. So timing is of the essence. You go too early, well, you're maybe doing something, maybe not the best thing, but it's what you can afford at that point, and you don't want to wait. You wait for too long, then you waste resources. So the timing and interaction is really impressive. It is a game in which you do not attack each other, but the indirect interaction is pretty impressive, because the board gives you such a strong sense of limited space, limited resources that everybody's competing for. I mean, there were just many times in which a player would do exactly what I was planning to do the next turn. So I just realized that the player had timed slightly better, had gone there one turn before, and reading the opponents or figuring out what they're going to do is key, and makes, of course, the game much more interesting, much different from what it would appear at first, because at first it appears to be like a fairly dry, collect resources, put them into a set, turn them into like a little wooden hat, and that's it. But there is much more to it, precisely because of the interaction, precisely of trying to read the opponent. And again, this is done in such a way that I'm not sending my tanks to attack your settlements. I'm simply placing a hut, placing a building in a place where I think you will. There's still that interaction, but it doesn't create that sort of like negative tension that you have in other games that are more confrontational. So I like this. It feels organic, it feels very interactive, again, non-confrontational. It's fairly abstract. The theme is not properly there. And this druid, this very suspicious figure that goes around knocking on doors and threatening to take victory points away from you if you don't make offerings. This very important element of the design, thematically, it doesn't seem all that interesting or really to contribute to the theme, but the game is not about the theme. It is a fairly abstract game, yes, with barely a theme, but the components are beautiful, and the mechanics of gameplay works. So to me that is okay. I really love thematic games, but there is a game that doesn't have much of a theme, but plays well, flows well, keeps me entertained every turn, including when my opponents are playing, because I'm trying to think what I'm going to do with the resources that I'm getting, or I'm deciding which resources to get or to lose. Well, when you have a game that has all of these advantages, the level of gameplay, and has a theme or no theme, I'm fine. And this is a really fun game. This is a game that I enjoy playing. And I'm happy to have it in my collection, because I know in the future I'll play with my daughter, I'll play with our friends, with the children of our friends when they come visiting. It is a game that really hits a sweet spot as a family game that can be played with children, with adults, only with children, only with adults, and it will work in all of these situations. So very happy. I'm very happy that HABA is going in this direction in particular, not just, well, they have decided to go there, who knows what they're gonna get, or, well, they decided to go in that direction and their first attempts are sort of like weak. Oh no, this is a new direction for them, but there's examples that they put out so far, Adventureland and especially Meduris, are of very high quality, especially Meduris. I like Meduris more than Adventureland. Adventureland is a fun little puzzle. Meduris is a respectable Eurogame with fun gameplay and a lot of reasons to keep you interested and engage with the design during gameplay. So, good job, HABA, and I don't know, give it a try if you're looking for a light, simple Eurogame with a lot of interesting decisions and timing elements so that you can play with your family. Meduris could be a good option.